And we're live. The weather is cold out there. Single bachelor, but anyway, we have to do this. We should do this. So today I'm going to talk about economic and social rights in Kenya. It's part of our constitution. So I'll just go over it a bit. Yeah, let's start this journey. So anyway, I wanted to start with a story of Alexander the Great. We all know that he was a big deal. That's why we call him the Great, right? And he started. His father was assassinated when he was just 22 years. So he took over the father's ambitions. One of them was to conquer Persia, and he did that very successfully. And here's a list of the kingdoms that Alexander conquered: Turkey, Iran, Syria, Israel, Egypt, Iraq, Greece, and a bit of Pakistan. So those were all the countries that Alexander conquered. The modern day names of the country. So as you can see, those are a lot of countries, a lot of people. And when he was dying, he was asked, this great empire that you've conquered, this great empire, who do you leave it to? Who will inherit it? And this is what Alexander said. He lifted up his hand as he was dying, and he said, to the strongest. So that was Alexander. And I wanted to give another quote by somebody called Clarence Darrow. It's a quote mostly attributed to Charles Darwin. And this is what Clarence said. It is not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but rather the one most adaptable to change. So that's what he said. Not the strongest species that survive, not the most intelligent that survive, but the ones who adapt most to change. And so I wanted to start on this note because I wanted to say something a bit controversial. It's not supposed to be controversial because it's true, but it will be. You have no right to anything in life. You have no right to ask me of anything, and I have no right to ask you of anything. You have no right to ask a collective number of people for anything, and they have no right to ask you for anything. Whatever you receive, you must work for it. You must go out, you must toil, and you will return with it, right? So a right is not something that you cannot have a right where you are asking people to give you something. You can only have a right where people are preventing you from receiving something. And that's an argument that I'll make when I compare it to the American Constitution. So when it comes to economic and social rights, what they basically do is that they ask society to give you something. And they call it a right, but it is not a right because you have no right to ask anyone of anything. When you ask of healthcare, right? You have a right to healthcare. Who is going to pay for that healthcare? Is it not the rest of us? So have you not put us in a position where you are asking us to guarantee something for you? That is not a right. But I will argue that out as I proceed. So anyway, I have my constitution here. For those, many people did not read it, but I actually read it. And that's why I feel this is the worst document that was ever devised in recent times. Because I read it. Most people did not read it. I read it. That's why it has earmarks and all of those things. So anyway, the part of the Constitution that we're going to be talking about today is Clause 43. It's on page 32. If you have your Constitution, it's on page 32. So this is what it says. I'll just go over the economic and social rights. That everyone has a right to the highest attainable standard of health, which includes the right to healthcare services, including reproductive healthcare. For those who do not know, reproductive healthcare is a code word for abortion. To the second right, economic and social right, to accessible and adequate housing and to reasonable standards of sanitation, to be free from hunger and to have adequate food of acceptable quality, to clean and safe water in adequate quantities, to social security, and to education. So that's the first clause. The second one is a person shall not be denied emergency medical treatment. I'm thinking this is the cases where you go for treatment at a hospital and they ask you for either your insurance card, or I think averagely it's around 50,000, just to prove that you can pay for whatever they're going to do for you. And then the state shall provide social security to persons who are unable to support themselves and their dependents. So those are the economic and social rights, and I just want to go over just a few of them. So to clause 1A, highest attainable standard of living. So you're supposed to have the highest attainable standard of healthcare. You're supposed to have the right to healthcare services, including reproductive healthcare. Again, reproductive healthcare, for those who understand, is a code word for abortion. So that's how they try to introduce abortion, just slowly pull, to cover their tracks. You use code words instead of the other words. So anyway, how do we attain this healthcare? We attain this healthcare through specific bodies, because the government now has to, the citizens have a right to these things, so the government has to create a body that will ensure that they receive these rights, right? And the body that we had before the constitution, and now that we have empowered by these economic and social rights, is NHIF when it comes to healthcare. The National Health Insurance Fund, because its purpose is to make sure that when you go to the hospital, whatever the doctors ask for in terms of payment, that NHIF might be able to help you with that, and that's how they ensure that you access healthcare. So anyway, I wanted to give an overview of this one, right? There's a story that's going around, I think you've heard it. There's an NHIF receptionist. The receptionist bought 8 houses. The value of those 8 houses was 160 million. A receptionist, right? So it was not just any receptionist. He grew up in Umoja. He went to Nakuru High School. He went to SIU, and after graduating, he joined NHIF in 2007 as a front office desk. He started with a salary of 50,000. So again, it's something that we might need to talk about in future in terms of connections when you're getting jobs, right? But that aside, today we're talking about healthcare in this case. So this dude, he gets into NHIF. He starts off with 50,000. That's good. He got in 2007. So by 2018, he should have a substantial amount of money, because like in 2007, that's when I was joining campus. So anyway, his lifestyle, according to the Star, it remains unchanged. But in 2013, everything changes. Why? Because he joins a tender evaluation committee at NHIF. And we all know the quickest way to get rich in Kenya is becoming a tenderpreneur. And if you cannot be on the other side bidding for tenders, then you might as well get rich on this side where you actually evaluate those tenders. So the dude, according to the Star, his lifestyle started changing suddenly. And yeah, he started buying houses and all of those things. And like we said, he bought 8 houses at 160 million Kenyan shillings. And so that's what we have. He's 39 years old, and he has Range Rovers and Toyota V8. So his salary is 150,000, right? Living in Nairobi, and he has all of these things. So there must be some kind of business that he did that made him so rich. But if there was that kind of business, wouldn't we have heard of it already? Perhaps we haven't heard of it already, because we all know that the ultimate business is being a tenderpreneur. And that's what these economic and social rights do. When you create bodies for non-existent rights, then what they end up doing is that they end up being cash cows for people, because they'll create these illusions in the masses that this government, the utopia, they'll create a utopia in the minds of the people that the government is coming to give them this, when in reality the people who are there, all they'll do is just steal and then sell dreams to you. They'll just sell you dreams. And that's what the NHIF does. This economic and social rights, this is what it leads to. Stealing. So anyway, this guy, his name is Frederick Sagwe Onyancha. He's not a Kikuyu, he's not a Kalenjin. When it comes to stealing, there's no tribe. So the MPs who are complaining right now that Kalenjins are being targeted, they're only complaining because as a defense so that we do not pursue them as hard as we should. So that's the only thing. When it comes to accessible and adequate housing and to reasonable standards of sanitation, again, the best way of stealing is creating an illusion for the people and then maintaining it. And every time, the illusion is so good that every time you tell these people, even though you stole, they still want that illusion. So people want housing. And when you sell them hope that they will receive housing, you can steal as much as you want to do, because at the end of the day, they'll just be saying, okay, that one stole, this one will not steal because we still need that housing. It's sad what happens, because it's preying on your emotions, preying on your idea that things might become better, and you hope that somebody will give it to you. But again, as I said, you have no right to anything. You have no right to ask people to give you something, because this housing, it comes from us, from the rest of us. They contribute. We cannot contribute to give somebody a house. Why not give myself a house? Why not give my family member a house? The illusion is unsustainable. And at the end of the day, since it's an illusion, it provides a gateway for people to steal. Like in housing. Right now we are people are being taxed, right? So that we can achieve Uhuru's dream of 500 units of housing in 5 years, right? 2.4, let me get this figure right. 2.4 million Kenyans, they qualify for this housing project under Uhuru, but only 500,000 units are going to be built. Again, it's a betting game. It's an illusion. Where even if 10 people receive these housing units, that is enough to feed the entire population to still believe in this illusion. It's like betting. It's like sports pesa. All you need to do is to give 260 million to one person, and then you can keep the 3 billion, right? So that's what they're doing. And when you look at this project, you'll find that 77,000, according to KPMG, people who are contributing to this project, they don't qualify for it. So why are you contributing to something that you do not qualify for? And what the government says is that it will reimburse those who do not qualify, and it will reimburse those who do not get houses. Remember, 2.4 million qualify, 500,000 will be built, right? So the government says that it will compensate those who do not qualify, the 77,000 who do not qualify, and then it will compensate the around 1.9 million people who will not receive these houses. Again, how much do you trust the government to compensate you for those kind of things? The government will raise 48 billion annually from this housing levy, according again to KPMG. 2022 is approaching, and the government has just found a scheme of raising 48 billion annually. And in this scheme, it will not deliver to everyone. It will just deliver to a fraction. Even if done perfectly, it will deliver just to a fraction of the population. It's a betting game. The idea is to sell you hope. If they get even 50,000 housing units completed, it's the same as sports pesa. You just get those ones, and then you feed the illusion for the rest of the population. Why? Because this one is not a right. The starting point is an illusion, and feeding an illusion is easy. So anyway, just going to the other one. Everybody has an economic and social right. Everybody has the right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food of acceptable quality. This is a lie. Nowhere in the world does everyone have the right to be free from hunger. It is a non-existent right. And let me just use the Bible for a second, because this constitution, it just flies in the face of Christianity, and that was the intention of creating it. Like I said, reproductive healthcare is a code word for abortion. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 10. Besides, while we were with you, we said clearly, if anyone is not willing to work, neither should that one eat. However, we have had that you live in idleness, busybodies doing. In the name of Jesus Christ our Lord, we command these people to work and earn their living. No one has a right to be free from hunger. You must work to be free from hunger. When you say adequate food of acceptable quality, how do you quantify acceptable quality? And how do you place it that I and the rest of us have to provide you with food of acceptable quality? Under what basis? Right? I go, I work, I take my money and I give it to you so that you can have food of acceptable quality. Never in the history has there been such a bad document drafted. Never. I've never seen such a bad constitution. But you see, all of these things is just creating a utopia, right? And one of the best things about utopia is that you can sell people hope. You can sell people an illusion. And in the meantime, you can steal from them. For example, when you check this one, the National and Cereals and Produce Board, the idea behind it is to create a strategic grain reserve so that we don't run out of food, right? And what happens at the National Cereals and Produce Board? They steal. This report, I think it was from Citizen TV, 226 fake farmers unearthed in NCPD scandal. 226 fake maize farmers. That's who we are giving our money to. Those are the people who are taking advantage of this illusion. And what happens when this illusion bubbles, when the bubble bursts? They simply say, let us stop producing maize, let us import it. Like Akina Mukomen are saying right now. Let us import it, because the illusion is no longer sustainable. People have realized that there's a serious problem at the NCPB, and the powers that be have realized that they can steal more by importing rather than steal from the farmers, from our taxes, which we used to pay the farmers. So anyway, the scandal here was around, as September 2018, was around 1.9 billion, right? 226 fake farmers, 21 names, right? They received, I think, around what, 1.4 billion, 21 people, 1.4 billion. Why? Because we are feeding a non-existent right. It's just an illusion. No one has the right to give you food. You must work for it. So the basis of this economic and social rights, it does not exist. Let's move to another one. You have a right to clean and safe water in adequate quantities. 41% of Kenyans, they rely on unimproved water sources. These are ponds, wells, rivers, and all of those things. 41% of Kenyans, right? And we are in 2018. 41. China is building what they call printed 3D printed bridges, right? And we don't have improved water sources, right? 41% Kenyans depend on ponds, wells, and rivers. And I think they're planning to build a hotel on the moon. And here, 41% of Kenyans do not have access to ponds, shallow wells, and rivers. Why? Because we have placed it as a right. It is not a right. You see, when you place it as a right, then you put the government behind it, because government has to ensure that rights are catered to. And the government is inefficient. So at the end of the day, you will never achieve the efficiency in that sector. That sector that you've now defined as a right, instead of a sector where business is supposed to flourish. So anyway, when you put the government behind it, this is what you have. You have rains falling, right? And then you have Ndakaini Dam empty. The rain is pouring down. Everybody is trying to rush home so that they can escape the rain. But Ndakaini Dam is at 30%. This was in April 2018. I think you can remember. People are buying water at 20 shillings per 20-liter jerrycan. Why? Because we have placed it as a right. instead of a sector where businesses are supposed to flourish, where the market is supposed to determine the price of it, where us as the consumers, we have sovereignty, we become despots, we become monarchs, and we choose services, and we dictate what we'll receive at what price and all of those things. But when you place it as a right, then the government has to come behind that. And these are the consequences of that. Social security, I won't dwell much on this one. NSSF, this scandal here, okay, there's a scandal in NSSF. They were supposed to build a building. It was to be 39 stories. They stalled at 8 stories, and then they contracted Chinese to build them to finish to 39. But then stuff happened, so they had to move down to 15 stories. Anyway, in summary, NSSF members, us, we could lose 11.5 billion in that project. It's the Hazina Tower project. 11.5 billion. And this is what you do when you put these things as right, illusions as right. This is what happens. So anyway, when it comes to education, I love the idea that people can go and receive education without paying anything. I love that idea. It's a good idea. But it's still an illusion. Education is not a right. Right? It is something that it's a good, it's a service, it's something that you have to pay for, right? So the cost should be the issue, and the ability to pay should be the issue, right? And why don't we have an ability to pay? Why is the cost so high? Because we've put the government behind it, and what the government does is that it steals. That's what it does, and all it needs to do is sell you some kind of hope. So auditors, they reveal that over 16 billion meant for the laptop project is missing. 16 billion meant for the free laptop project. Why? Because children have a right to receive education. Let's give them laptops. Let's give them books. Let's give them everything. And at the end of the day, what happens is that it's not that we're giving them, somebody is paying for them, and we're the ones who are paying for it. But within that window where somebody is paying for it, that we don't really conceptualize who's paying for it, and somebody is receiving it, within that small window, that's where the stealing happens. Because we do not actually realize who's paying for it. We just see it coming, So even if it comes a little bit of it, it's okay, because we don't realize that it's stealing from one pocket, right, and putting it in another pocket, or taking it from one pocket and putting it in another pocket, right? When you maintain it in your pocket, then you have certain when you maintain it in your pocket, then you actually have rights, because when it's your pocket, nobody has a right to say what you will do with what is in your pocket. But as soon as you give it away, and then now you expect the circle to go around and then receive it, then you lose now your right, because you've put more people into it, and then you put an efficient party into it, government. So anyway, just to one thing, these guys, they bought 600 million of this cash was lost on defective laptops, because we want kids to receive free stuff. Utopia, I keep on saying. So anyway, let's go to the American kind of way. Remember, the Kenyan kind of way, this economic and social rights, what it does is that it entrenches what we refer to as serikali nisaidie, that we hope for the government to come in and help us, to bring education, to bring housing, to bring healthcare, to bring all of those things. But a right in essence, what it is to be free. So you have a right to be free. You do not have a right to receive. You have a right to walk without being impeded. You do not have a right to call somebody to walk with you, or to call somebody to pay for your bus fare. Those are not rights. Rights are freedoms. And that is what the Americans and Europeans got right. The John Locke Trinity was the right to life, right to property, and right to liberty. Those are the things that you have right to, right? To own a piece of land, I have a right to do that. When you interfere with that piece of land, that's when the government now is supposed to come in to protect that actual right. It's an actual right, because now you're interfering with my freedom. I did not come to you. I did not come to you for you to buy me a piece of land. I bought it on my own, right? So that's where the right comes from. Why are you coming and interfering with this property of mine? And I got it on my own. Why are you doing that? And if I'm powerless to do that, then I'll give the government money in terms of taxes, and now the government is supposed to come and fight you or push you back, right? Anyway, the Americans introduced what they call right to life, property, and the pursuit of happiness. You can be at liberty, you can be free, let's say roaming around, right? But you're not free to pursue your kind of happiness. Like the Americans, somebody wants to own a tank, a military tank. He feels that that's what makes him happy. Let him have that. Right? Because he uses his money, he uses ingenuity to either build it or to make money so that he can buy it. Let him pursue his happiness. That's what makes him happy, right? And when it comes to, so I think I'll just leave it at that, right? I think it's a good thing. So American, let me give you the Bill of Rights, like a breakdown, real quick. The first one is the freedom of speech amendment, the first amendment to the American Constitution. Freedom of religion, speech, and the press. I have a right to speak. I have a right to go to pursue the religion that I want, right? I have a right to, write journalism and all those kind of things. I'm not asking somebody to give me something. I am asking that you do not interfere with what I want, with my freedom, with what I want to do. Are we together? We need to get these things. The right to bear arms, right? Every animal has a self-defense mechanism, and humans, the current self-defense mechanism that we have is the right to bear arms, and this is what they have. I have a right to that, to bear arms. I'm not asking you to give me guns. I will go and buy it for myself, and with this right, I will prevent other people from interfering with my rights. I will not use it to force other people to buy your house, to pay for your healthcare, and all of those kind of things. Anyway, the third amendment, the housing of soldiers. It says, no soldiers shall in the time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. You cannot come into my house without my consent. Again, stay out of my place. The fourth one, protection from unreasonable search and seizures. Again, stay out of my house, stop searching my property, without my consent. The fifth one, protection to the rights of life, liberty, and property. Again, stay out of my property. The rights of the accused person in criminal cases, right? Like when you take me to court, I have a right to that evidence that you are going to present to me. Stay out of my, I have a right to you see, I'm not forcing my accuser to come in and accuse me. I am just saying that what I need is a right to a fair hearing. Give me access to that. Do not prevent me from getting that kind of freedom, that kind of fairness. Anyway, so the other one is the right to, in civil cases, right in bail. Okay, basically it's just that. And what I'm trying to say is that let's stop this recurrence idea. Let's actually, because it entrenches corruption, it entrenches poverty. Let's focus on actual rights, where the government stays away and we stay with our rights. So that's what I have today. Goodbye. Tomorrow at 5 p.m.